if you are positioning yourself as an order taker, guess what? You're going to get ordered around a lot. The best brands are the best storytellers. Sometimes the hardest things to do, but the best thing to do is to let go of an idea. Meet new people who are younger that are going to have a divergent perspective from you. Understanding like where you fit into an organization is also really important, no matter what that is.
Let's talk about fortune cookies. You crack one open and you get a little slip of paper with some vague wisdom or a lucky number. But what if that tiny slip could do more? What if it could actually deliver your brand's message right into the hands of millions of people? That's where Open Fortune comes in. Open Fortune is flipping the script on traditional advertising by turning fortune cookies into powerful marketing tools. They've partnered with 47,000 restaurants across the US to get your brand in front of people when they're chilled out, happy, and ready to engage. This isn't just some banner ad people scroll past. It's a message they'll actually remember. So if you're tired of the same old marketing tactics and want to try something that actually works, head over to openfortune.com. Your brand's next big move might just be inside a fortune cookie. Shout out Open Fortune for making today's episode of CMO Weekly possible. Welcome to CMO Weekly. Today we're excited to have Andrew Katz, the CMO of Athletic Brewing Company, joining us. With over 2 decades of experience in the marketing world, Andrew has led transformative campaigns for some of the biggest brands across various industries. Andrew's journey in marketing began with roles at renowned companies such as PepsiCo and American Express, where he played pivotal roles in developing and executing innovative advertising strategies. At PepsiCo, he spearheaded the Refresh Everything campaign, which repositioned the Pepsi brand and later led the marketing efforts for iconic brands like Mountain Dew and Soba. His career took a significant leap when he joined the Heineken Company as the VP of Marketing for Dos Equis, where he developed strategic plans that helped the brand outperform the total beer category. His work earned him a 2017 Effie Gold Award for sustained performance. In 2021, Andrew took on the role of Chief Marketing Officer at Athletic Brewing Company, where he now leads the brand's growth and strategy in the competitive non-alcoholic beer market. His expertise in building brand identity, coupled with his passion for innovative marketing, has been instrumental in Athletic Brewing's rise to prominence. Andrew also brings a unique blend of creative insight and practical execution to his role, having founded Instructor, a virtual fitness platform, and serving as an indoor cycling instructor at Equinox. Andrew, you got to talk to me, man. How'd you get here? You know?
What's up, David? What's up, Carlo?
What's up, Andrew?
Thank you. Firstly, thanks for having me on the show. I'm excited to pick up where we left off.
There we go. We were having some good banter with Andrew Katz.
Good banter right before we got into the the meat of the show.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it. I mean, growing up, man, like I don't think you probably, when you were in first grade, were thinking about being the CMO of a non-alcoholic beer company. So what was that dream job when you were just a little lad?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was always drawn to things that were in culture, for lack of a better word, that things that were kind of interesting or things that people talked about were always intrigued. I was always intrigued by that. I was really into music when I was a kid. So I would go to record stores when they existed and, go spend hours like looking for music. And, I was really intrigued by kind of the art of performance and the art of kind of breaking through the clutter, right? Because if you think about how do brands break through, right? That was something I was always intrigued by, and then thinking about, okay, well, how do you apply that to products? Right?
What was an early brand for you, whether it's a commercial or a campaign that a certain brand ran that evoked some sort of emotion in you, or you're like, that's cool, like that got my attention, or whatever emotion it did?
Well, at the risk of dating myself, there was a campaign for Life cereal, and it was all about, hey, Mikey, try this cereal. And it was about like this kid, Mikey, who didn't like anything. And his brothers were like ribbing him, come on, get Mikey to try it. It's a healthy cereal. And if Mikey likes it, well, then it's, it passes the Mikey test. And that was just like an idea that I come back to often, which is, how do you kind of overcome a barrier that people have? Like, oh, that's healthy, it's going to taste bad. Or in the case of non-alcoholic beer, why would I drink that? And so, whether it's a Life cereal commercial or it's trying to get people over the barrier of non-alcoholic beer is not for me, to, wow, athletic tastes just like beer. This is amazing. And, this is something I'm going to add into my drinking repertoire.
We'll get into the athletic stuff, but I want to start just in your early career place, right? You wanted to talk about life lessons that you learned throughout your journey, right? What was something that you learned that, you would probably want your 18, 20-year-old, 21-year-old self to know about?
I started working, trying to think, probably at like 15 or 16. I got my first job. And I think one of the things I learned, because I worked in restaurants, as a busboy, as a waiter, as a dishwasher, is just the art of serving people. And, how do you connect on a human level with people? How do you understand what they want? How do you service them? How do you over deliver on what they're looking for? Whether that's refilling their water glasses when it gets emptied without them having to come, wave you over. But being attentive, paying attention, being observant, those were all things I learned early on. And then also like taking jobs that are not necessarily glamorous. Washing dishes is not a glamorous job, but it's a necessary job. It's a functional job. It helps to keep an operation running. If you have no clean plates or no clean glasses, guess what? You can't put food on the table. So understanding like where you fit into an organization is also really important, no matter what that is. And do it with, grace, do it with dignity, do it with care. And I always just had that. That was just something that kind of carried with me. I worked at a car dealership in high school, detailing cars. So when somebody would buy a car, you'd kind of get that car ready. And I took a lot of pride in, like I didn't sell the car, I didn't make the car, but I was the last touch before somebody got into their new vehicle, and maybe they've saved their entire lives to buy that thing, and how do you make that experience so great and so memorable that they are, genuinely enthusiastic about spending a lot of money, and, and that I played a very small role in that.
Andrew, I love that, man, because a lot of our listeners are, folks that are, graduating college, getting their graduate degrees, just starting out in the workforce, and the marketing land. And I think a lot of people, it's almost like they feel their job might be beneath them. But like you said, it's functional, it's important, and finding those moments where, damn, this is impactful. And ultimately, I think it comes down, you said grace and dignity and such true words. It's respect for yourself, for the process, and for the time of what you're doing. It actually does impact people. So I love that you said that, and I mean that hits home.
The other kind of things about early career jobs is you're doing a lot of things that are just necessary, right? You're not necessarily on a path, like they're not leading you to something greater, right? Like I delivered pizza in college for Domino's, right? And it was not a very glamorous job, but I needed to pay for gas, right? So this was just, but again, it goes back to this, so maybe some core tenets of like, can you serve people well? Can you observe carefully? Can you see like, hey, I noticed there's an opportunity to do this, or this a little bit better, right? No matter where you are in an organization, the more you pay attention and the more you observe like what works well and what doesn't, the more agency you have to, raise your hand and say, hey, by the way, I noticed this, right? And then I think that's a strong signal to a boss that like, oh, Carlo's really very astute when it comes to, how we do this, that, or whatever. And maybe we can give him more to do. Because a lot of times, either you can ask for more or you can just demonstrate that you're capable of more. And then, by and large, you're going to accumulate more experience. You're going to accumulate more challenge because people recognize, oh, they can step up and they can do that. And even if you don't, right? Even if you try something and it doesn't work out, I think being honest about that and saying, hey, here's what I did. It didn't work like I thought it was, and here's what I learned. And I think almost any person in a company or a boss is really going to appreciate the ability to be introspective about what didn't go well, right? Because nobody is going to pat you on the back and say, wow, that was a great job screwing that up.
Correct. But they're going to understand that you came up with the idea, tried to execute on it. It did or did not work for a variety of different reasons. Some might be your own, some might be others. And I'd rather have someone at the organization 10 times over that comes up with the ideas and gives it a shot than sits and says, tell me what to do every day, like any day of the week.
Right. If you are positioning yourself as an order taker, guess what? You're going to get ordered around a lot.
Yep.
If you can position yourself as somebody who's a thought leader in whatever capacity, you're going to be referenced as, oh, why don't we go ask Carlo, for help? Or why don't we go ask Carlo for what he thinks?
100%. 100%.
Let's talk a little bit about resilience. I'd love to just have you share a time when you faced a significant setback and, what you learned from that experience.
So I've always been an athlete almost all my entire life, and sports is pretty central to how I think of myself. And, I remember in college going and trying out to go play soccer, and there was a varsity team or nothing, or club. And, I remember I did a pretty decent job as, 18, 19-year-old, preparing myself for the preseason and training, and I was fit, and, I was really excited because I'd never not made a team. I thought I was a good soccer player, and probably not one of the best, but good. And I remember, the day after tryouts, they kind of post up on the wall, like, who made the team. And, I ran to the gym and going to look and see my name on the list. I didn't see my name on the list. And then I went, I was like, oh, maybe there's a mistake, and just confronting the reality of not making a team for the first time in my life was just a crushing blow to the ego. Cause I just, figured, all right, well, I've always played soccer in the fall since I was 3 years old. So I'm going to play soccer in the fall. And that was, a string of setbacks in college where I also applied to be an RA, didn't get that job. So there were a bunch of very humbling moments where it's things have always worked out for me. I've never, not gotten a job, or I've never not made a team. And I do think that caused me to, think, okay, well, what could I have done differently? What would have made a difference? And sometimes there's just better competition. Sometimes the players are just going to be better. And sometimes they're just better qualified candidates. And it's not necessarily you, right? It's how do you frame that experience for yourself, right? Was I the best and nobody recognized that? That's probably a little delusional. It's probably that I either needed to work harder, I needed to be better. And, one setback or a couple of setbacks does not define you as a person, right? So I think the resilience part is okay, I didn't make the team. That sucked. However, I'm going to go be the best club soccer team player on the field, right? Or I didn't get the RA job, but I got a different job, and that's going to teach me other things. So, I think, the Stoic philosophy, right, is there's neither good nor bad. Things happen, and it's really how you interpret them that makes a difference. So I one lesson, and I don't know that I was that deep back then, but I think as I've evolved as a person and done a little bit more listening, and The Object is the Way is a great read if you've never read it, but it really is about how you react, right? How you respond is the difference maker in how you propel yourself forward.
I'm a huge Ryan Holiday fan, so I've read all his books, including the most recent one, and actually I've met him in person. So I totally agree and echo that sentiment of kind of, controlling what you can control in the situation and learning from it. I'm curious, right? What key influences did you have throughout your career and personal life, whether it be a life lesson or somebody who taught you something in business to your approach to business and life?
So I'll cite a couple of things. One is
It can't be Ryan Holiday. Yeah.
No, I think there are a couple of things. Number one, my dad was probably one of the first entrepreneurs I ever met. He worked for big companies. He was in healthcare. He was a healthcare consultant, and he, worked for some really big firms. And then I think, he was like, look, I can do this on my own. I don't want to be a part of a big conglomerate that's just bureaucratic. And so, I saw him evolve into his own company, and that company got sold and bought. And then, he went and worked for the company for a while and then left and kind of redid his own thing. And that just taught me a lot about, I didn't really know a detail about like what he did, but I knew that, he had to make payroll. I knew that he had to go get clients. I knew that, he was always engaged in what he was doing and really proud of it. And I think the thing that I learned from him is how much pride he took in doing a good job, in getting client referrals, in and making the clients' businesses better. So that was a really early lesson from my dad, and I wish I had probably paid more attention to like the nuts and bolts of it. And then, on the other side of that was just, I was always really intrigued by culture. As I was mentioning before, I was always a huge music fan. I loved film. And so just like the art of creating something from scratch, or the art of creating at all, was always really intriguing to me, and just different genres and different styles of movies, but just how to tell a great story, whether that's through music or whether that's through film. But storytelling was something that influenced me a lot. And I think, the best brands are the best storytellers. Obviously, you have to have a great product, right? That's just paramount. But assuming you have a great product, how do you tell a great story about that is going to engage people?
And that's a perfect transition into, your time at PepsiCo. You worked for huge brands, Mountain Dew, Pepsi, Soba, Sierra Mist, right? What was the key to storytelling with those, as well as kind of your expectation versus reality when you're working at a huge conglomerate like that?
I was incredibly fortunate to have been surrounded by some of the smartest people that I've ever worked with during my tenure at Pepsi. And just, I think if you allow yourself to be a sponge and not feel like you have to have all the answers, it's a really liberating experience. You obviously bring something to the table, that's why you're there, but also having the humility to know that I don't really know a lot of things, and I'm here to help, but I'm really here to learn and paying attention, right? Because there are a lot of people saying a lot and doing a lot of really smart things around you, and you can kind of ignore it because you're like, heads down, I've got my projects, I got to get these done. Or you can really immerse yourself in, hey, what's happening over here? And I'd like to go out to lunch with this person and just learn more about what they're up to. So it's really being curious. And I know that sounds a little cliche, but I can't emphasize that enough. The more curious you are, the more truly interested you are, the more you're going to be able to take away and learn. So when I was working on those big brands, the thing in particular, I'll cite Mountain Dew because I think it's a pretty insane success story, just how big it's gotten. And one of the ways that they were able to really scale the business was they always had a real strong connectivity to grassroots things happening in culture, whether that was music or whether that was skateboarding or whether that was gaming. And that was eye-opening for me, because if you think about how scale that brand is, right? Put out great advertising and the brand will fly off the shelf. But the reality is connecting to culture and cultural moments and being a part of these different communities really was central to making that brand go and continue to drive its prominence in the soda category.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense as well. And I feel like Mountain Dew is kind of this almost like Red Bull before Red Bull, counter brand. You end up moving from more of a counter brand with Mountain Dew to Amex, which is more buttoned up, etc. Right? What made that the right move, and what did you learn there?
Throughout my career, where I never really wanted to be pigeonholed. I never really wanted to be like, oh, he's like a soda guy, or he's a financial services guy, or because I think it's easy to get typecast as like, well, they can only do that one thing. And it was really important for me personally to evolve and demonstrate that, yes, I could do other things in other contexts. And I was curious about working on this world-class brand, Amex, with significant resources, and for the category that it is in, some of the best marketing that I think we've seen coming out of financial services. So it was an opportunity to work with an old boss, which was really cool, and to have a pretty large remit in terms of here's what we were trying to accomplish at the time. So it was, I think, a good experiment, ultimately one that proved not to be my jam. Financial services was not my jam, but I really learned a lot, had a great experience, and I learned that was not really how I wanted to spend my days. And so when the opportunity to came to join Heineken had been a brand that I admired, my entire professional career. I had actually interviewed at the Heineken Company years prior, didn't get the job. So I had an opportunity to go back and get a role there. And it's truly one of the most world-class brands out there,
Totally.
and truly global. It was like the UN of marketing. So it's like I had people I was working with from Mexico and from Spain and from the Netherlands, and you name it, and they were there. And it was a really cool, mind-expanding experience to just be in the room with all these people who had very, very different experiences from you.
Absolutely. I mean, everybody remembers like the most interesting man in the world, Dos Equis, right? That was a masterclass on marketing. I'm curious, right? At Heineken, I'm sure, you're responsible for a lot of people. You got a solid budget, right? You decide to initiate a 3-year sponsorship with the ESPN and college football, right? You are looking at all of these opportunities that people are probably always pitching you on, right? How do you go back through like sorting through the correct opportunities for the brand and pushing through the right ones?
My tenure on Dos Equis and at the Heineken Company was probably the most tumultuous, most challenging marketing challenge I've ever faced, because here you've got this seminal campaign that has been running for 8 years and everybody knows. And, the reality is it's starting to lose its efficacy. It's starting to not be as relevant. The main character is starting to get, old, because that's what happens, And so we were really at an inflection point with the brand, and we needed to do something to maintain the trajectory that the brand was on. And at the time, it was one of the fastest growing brands in the US, and was trying to expand its footprint to become much more. It was a national brand in terms of distribution, but it had a lot of regional strongholds, but it was not a ubiquitous brand. So the goal was, how do we translate interesting, right? That was whatever that was 8 years prior into today's context. And the hypothesis that we worked with was, well, let's treat this like James Bond, right? James Bond is something that has withstood the test of time. And the way that they've done that is to tell new stories with new characters. And so that was sort of our blueprint for what we were going to go do. We did a global search. We looked for new main characters. We explored different options, as you might imagine, woman, people of color to be the main characters. Ultimately, we landed on a character, and we launched a new campaign. And for the most part, we had to retire the old most interesting man and bring the new most interesting man in the world into the fold. And the reality is, I think we didn't satisfy the core fans of the brand, because they loved their main character. They didn't want to see him go. And to the new fans, they just weren't as interested. So I don't know that we really cracked the code on that one. And if I had to do it all over again, I think I would do it differently, to be totally honest. And that was,
what do you think you would have done?
I think I would have acknowledged that, this period of the brand is over. Like, we're retiring this idea. And the reason why is because the idea, when it came into culture, was so breakthrough and so different. The times have changed, right? Like, that came to the world at a time before there was social media. There was no Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, and now everybody in the world is doing interesting things, right? Like, all day, every day, and YouTube. So where we had maybe more of a monopoly on that idea, the rest of the world democratized that, and all of a sudden, interesting is everywhere, or entertaining is everywhere. And I just think sometimes the hardest thing to do, but the best thing to do, is to let go of an idea. And that's a really hard thing to go and walk into the, executive team and say, so here's the idea. We're going to kill the most interesting man in the world, and we're not going to replace him. And they're like, okay, your papers are on your desk. You just need to sign them, and security will escort you out of the building.
High five.
High five. So I think it takes courage. It takes courage to kind of kill the golden goose.
Totally.
But sometimes that's the right thing to do.
Yeah. That's also a Stoic philosophy, right? Of sunk cost. Just because it's not working doesn't mean you just will it into working.
Yeah. I think it's called the sunk cost fallacy.
Yeah,
yes,
sunk cost
fallacy is that it's gonna. Well, we just need another week. We just need another month. And the truth is,
it'll all be good. Exactly. I'd love to. When's the first time? Just hear about when's the first time you had a non-alcoholic beer, and what that experience was like.
That's a great question. So, I have a group of friends that we go out, in town, and we went out for a dinner on a Tuesday night. And everyone's like, oh, I'll have a buckler. I was like, a what? They're like, oh, I'll have a buckler. I'm like, what's a buckler? They're like, oh, it's a non-alcoholic beer. It's like, really? And, because this is a group that normally drinks.
And what year is this?
This is probably 2018, thereabouts. Yeah. And so I was like, cool, I'll have the buckler, right? And I think that was the first time I had a non-alcoholic beer. And to be honest, it was pretty disappointing. It was kind of watery. It was not really aspirational. It was not, it was better than water, but it was not really I didn't feel like, oh, I'm drinking a great beer right now.
How did Athletic Brewing get introduced to you in your life?
It was a truly organic, you can't make this stuff up experience. So I ran a half marathon trail race in Westchester, and super hot day, super humid.
Where was it? Mechanical Hills, or where did you do it?
No, it's called Pain to Pain. So it starts in New Rochelle, goes all the way up to Scarsdale, comes back down. You finish at the New Rochelle High School. And I remember, kind of you finish on the track. I was like, man, this is the longest track I've ever been on, because usually they're a set distance. But I was so just absolutely washed, and cross the finish line, drinking water. And then I see this Athletic Brewing non-alcoholic beer tent. I was like, nothing has ever sounded so good to me in my life. And so I walk over to the tent, and there's our co-founder, Bill Schufelt, behind the table. He had run the race already. And, I was at Heineken at the time, and we just kind of started talking, and he was sharing the beers, and I kept asking him for more. I was like, do you mind if I have more? And he's like, no, it's great. And this was early days. I think this was 2018. So company was founded in 2017, and it was just a very organic, authentic way of meeting the brand. And that ethos still carries through for us today. We still go out and meet people where they are at the end of the finish line, 5Ks, 10Ks, all the way up to Ironmans. And then I got a call about the role a couple years later from a headhunter, and I was like, you're never going to believe this, but I met Bill, at the sampling table. So I remember him. I doubt he'll remember me, because he's done a lot of sampling in those couple of years, but I definitely remember meeting him and thought he was just, one of the most humble, earnest guys, especially for a co-founder or founder. And I still think that today after having worked with him for almost 3 years now.
I like that you said that meeting the people where they are. I remember the first time I had Athletic, I was getting done with a swim at Lifetime, and somebody, I guess there was hired some type of event staff that was handing them out poolside to everyone just to try. And I just finished the pool. As I got up from the water, it's like, would you like some Athletic? I was like, what is it? Non-alcoholic beer. I'm like, okay, yeah, that kind of sounds great right now. It was a perfect marriage in that moment. So I love that. Capturing people a little bit thirsty, right? But also, could use that, like, that perfect beer in that moment without having, all the extra effects. I love it. It's perfect.
I had the same experience after like a 45, like it was like a 50-mile bike race, and then there was the tent, and that was it. So it's interesting.
Yeah, you guys are doing 50-mile bike races, marathons, and I did 10 laps in the pool.
You're like, I'll have beer. Yeah, no joke. So what was it about?
David imagine, just flexed on us.
Yeah, he did. He's done Ironmans. Like he'll flex all day. He'll throw it in there. So
I think a half marathon is way harder than 50-mile bike ride, easily. So much harder. But any chat. Yeah. But so I have my expectations, right, of why you accepted this role, right? It's a cool brand. They're doing something new. They're innovating. They are growing rapidly, right? But what about the opportunity really spoke to you, and what was the main reason for bringing you on as the CMO?
So I'll speak to the first part of the question first. So for me, there were probably three things that are really essentially important to me these days. One is to do something that is entrepreneurial. I had just been running my own startup and banging my head against the wall for most of that experience. So it was really, really hard. And I understood how difficult, getting something off the ground is, rolling up your sleeves and having people say no, 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 no to you all day long. So I wanted to continue in that vein, but probably in a different context where we had a bit more wind at our backs. So that was number one. Number two, I really, really cared a lot about having a mission-driven company. Like, we're trying to make a small dent in the universe around people's health, well-being, wellness, and taking some alcohol out of people's lives, but it's still enabling them to have great experiences, very social. That really spoke to me because I wanted to do something that was purposeful, in a job. And then the third thing is I love beverages, right? Like, I've worked in beverage for a long time, and I think one of the things that we can still agree on is like having a beer together and just talking about life. And, you don't sit down with a seltzer and like, well, tell me your life story, right? You sit down with a beer and you say, tell me your life story. And whether it has alcohol in it or not, it's still a great time to be social and drink something very savory and delicious. And so all those, like, that was the triangle of, yes, I want this job.
I mean, those are all good reasons, and what Athletics stands for is awesome. But what was the reason for the CMO hire from the founders? And what did success look like then, and what does it look like now?
So at the time, so this was 2021. At the time, the brand was doing well. We had just bought a new facility in Milford, Connecticut. So we were brewing in Stratford, small brewery. We'd expanded on the West Coast, had a brewery in San Diego. We had just committed to building a bigger brewery in Milford where we could produce, I think it's 100 or 450 barrels of beer, right? So that was significant. In our first year, I think we produced 875 barrels of beer in 2018. By 2023, we were producing 255,000 barrels of beer. So you can imagine the brand was growing rapidly and the team was awesome. And I have to give so much credit to the marketing team and Bill and John, the two co-founders, for laying just this impeccable foundation. So like, I was walking into a great situation. They had a great brand name. They had, strong product market fit. And they just had kind of unlocked something that people were really ready for, right? People were really ready for, a great tasting beer that didn't have alcohol because they still wanted to drink, but they just didn't want to have the calories or the downside of alcohol. And so therefore, this was the time to bring somebody like me in who had worked on scale brands, who had been around the block a little bit in terms of marketing campaigns, but also just thinking about holistically the marketing function, right? So it's not, like back in the day, having a great ad campaign. Well, your job is done here. The world has changed so much. And I've learned a ton, by the way, since joining Athletic, about how I'd say modern marketing has evolved. And we're very so one of the other things too is just bringing a lot more analytics to what we're doing. So working with MMM tools, working with MTA tools, brand health trackers, creative testing. So, not trying to kill the spark of the brand, but rather like in jiu-jitsu, like you just rechannel the energy in a different way. And there was so much great energy, but a lot of it was very frenetic. And so it was bringing a little bit of, professionalism to it, trying to do less because everyone wanted to do everything. And then measuring the outcome, like being really intentional about here's what we want to do, here's how we're going to measure it, and then, evaluating how we did.
So is that what you felt was really missing when you came on, like the data and analytics measurement component, or is there something else? And then secondly, what was working really well that you just wanted to kind of put some gasoline on?
So, I think probably the smartest thing that Bill and John did was create a proprietary process to make really a superior product. So that I had nothing to do with. That was just, I walked in and that was there. And that was like, wow,
Right.
This is incredible. I'd say the thing that stood out to me a lot was like, we had this incredible brand name. We've got this beautiful packaging, but we're kind of burying the headline, right? So like we buried the lead. Athletic is really the thing that we want to have as our bar call, as our retail shout. It's like, where's your Athletic? Can I get an Athletic? And if we didn't do that on our packaging, and if you think about the touch point that we have the most of every single day, that is our packaging. So how do we optimize that? So that was one of the first things was like, how do we really lean into Athletic and minimize Brewing Company? Because Brewing Company is, it is true, but it's not important. So just focusing on the important things, emphasizing that over the fanciful name of the brand. Like we were very focused on, it's Free Wave, it's Upside Down. They're all cool names. But everyone's like, hey, do you have that blue Athletic or the yellow Athletic? And it was like just listening to what consumers were saying. Nobody knows, the names of the brand. They like the master brand and they like the different styles. And that was the important thing. So really focusing on like that, because that is our media. Our best media is our packaging. And then making sure that from 10 feet away, we were instantly recognizable.
Right.
You didn't miss us on the shelf.
You mentioned that when you joined, things were a little bit, frenetic. It was, we want to do everything all at once. Was there something that during your tenure prior, or something you're thinking about that was, I don't know, a little out of the box, a little bit of a big idea that you want to chew on or execute it on that you're really proud of or excited about?
Yeah, I think some of it was, we were doing some really cool partnerships when I showed up, and it was how do we do those partnerships on steroids? So we've managed to do stuff with Netflix. We've managed to do stuff with Super Coffee. We've managed to do stuff with some bigger brands that, it's like, wait a minute, you're doing what with Netflix? So it was thinking also about two things. One is we've done I would say a masterful job, Bill and John in particular, and the guy who runs our comms, Chris, have done a really masterful job of doing great things in PR. So like they've just done a really great job of getting the story told in a way that people are receptive to. Generally speaking, people aren't seeking out advertising, right? It's the thing standing between you and what you want to do. But I'd rather read a story about this up and coming company or these two, entrepreneurs. So that has been really impactful. And then how do we use our partnerships to really scale our PR, right? Like it's, Netflix and Athletic Brewing Company. I know Netflix, but Athletic Brewing Company, who are they? So now we're just able to attract a whole new audience of people by virtue of working together with a bigger brand. That is also just aligned with what we're doing.
Yeah, and I mean, I saw you guys recently partnered up with Arsenal, which is awesome. I'm curious how that partnership came to be, and how you're looking at that with the Premier League, and because it's not your stereotypical just let's throw it at paid, right? It's aligning with a household name with a completely different audience in a completely different country, and yeah, how you're viewing success there.
Yeah, to add to that, like what David's saying is like, you're talking about data and analytics. We always think about, for us, obviously we're sponsoring this cultural moment of, this moment eating around a table with family and friends, thinking about your future, talking about it. That's what brands like Verizon and Chime and Cars.com, that's what they sponsor. And we have measurement components to it. When we look at, sports sponsorships, we're always, thinking about like, how brands measure that impact. What are those partners providing to make sure that brands understand like this is something that we want to do again and again and again?
It's really, I'd say, very simple, right? How do we get people closer to a moment of consumption? So beer drinking and football in the UK are synonymous, but the trend in the UK is similar to the US. Consumers are looking to drink less alcohol. And again, 80% of our drinkers drink alcohol. We're not a brand that's a soapbox brand. We're very much about like, you do you. We just want to be in your repertoire so that when you're looking to cut out or you're looking to kind of zebra stripe your night, like a regular athletic, then we just want to be a great option. So with respect to Arsenal, we have a business in the UK. We want to really expand that business and grab a foothold. And London is a major opportunity market for us. So we went with one of the most storied clubs in North London, Arsenal. And they also happen to have a massive fan base in the US, right? So there's a massive Arsenal fan base. So it translates into, the US market, UK market. And we have a distribution deal there. So we're sold at Emirates Stadium. We're going to be able to sample. We'll be available at bars all around North London and the Emirates Stadium. So for us, it's really about just becoming a part of the fabric, right? This shouldn't be like a weird thing. Oh, you're not drinking tonight, or why are you drinking that? 100%. It's like, right. It's just now this is the new normal. And I was just looking at data right before we got on the call. And it's just wild to see, like Gallup just published a study about alcohol consumption is increasingly viewed as unhealthy in the US. So especially among 18 to 34-year-olds, they're just drinking less for better health. That is a global phenomenon we're seeing everywhere. So Arsenal made a ton of sense because younger fans are looking for it. We're a cool, great tasting brand. And, whether you're participating in sports or you're watching sports, it's still beer drinking occasions. And we want to be around those beer drinking occasions where we naturally fit.
That makes total sense. I get the alignment 100%. I'm just curious, like, is there a way that are you measuring it from direct lift in a particular area in sales? Is it traffic?
Yeah.
Is it
Yeah.
at the stadiums? Is like, what's the way that you're measuring the success?
Sure. So obviously in the UK market that's growing, we're looking for new points of distribution. So how quickly can we use this partnership to grow our points of distribution? Same store rate of sale. We look at, places where we've been for a year already. Do we see a lift in sales? And then also just awareness. Like our awareness is quite low in the UK. Even in the US, we're at about 21% aided awareness, which is good. We know that there's major opportunity there. So how do we do things that helped us to increase our awareness and consideration? Because we know people are gravitating towards the category. The category in the US is already up 30% year to date. We're like double that in terms of our own growth. And in the UK, how do we translate that experience where people are actively seeking out these products? How are we top of mind for those who are?
Love it. Super helpful.
I would just love to learn about your personal life, what you're proud of, and, if you have any life lessons for the audience, just when it comes to personal side, since we spoke about work for the majority of the pod.
I think it's cliche, but I'm proud of my family, my kids, my wife. She's a lawyer, but she also has a real passion for rescuing dogs, and so we do a lot of fostering and a lot of help with dogs near and dear to our hearts. We've got 2 of our own, and kids. Kids are, it's not just like they raise themselves. Like there's a lot that you need to do. I think one of the things that I enjoy about marketing and my kids is it's very tangible to them, right? They give me ideas unsolicited all the time, about athletic and about marketing. And sometimes they're really good ideas actually. And, through the lens of people that don't have, they're unconstrained, right? They have unconstrained ideas. They're not worrying about budget. They're not worrying about feasibility. They're just like, hey, what about this? So that's really fun. Like I wish I had going back to my dad and like being more interested in what he was doing. It didn't feel very tangible to me. Like there was no commercial I could comment on. There was no, print ad. There was no social media influencer that we were working with. So I think all of that's been really fun, and they will continue to teach me things, as much as I like to think, well, I'm going to point you in the right direction. So that's something I'm really proud of. And also I have this, side hustle job teaching indoor cycling, and that's something I'm really proud of, that it's something I love to do. I love to be able to give back to people, energy, sweat, and it's very fulfilling in a 45-minute class. You walk in and knowing people are just going to feel a little bit better about themselves 45 minutes later. And I get to listen to my own music, and I get to, people listen to me for 45 minutes and they do what I tell them. All that's is really fun. And I've been doing that for a long time. And that's just, something I look forward to doing each and every week.
Love it. Hell, man, you're making them feel good for the rest of the day. When you just talking to a colleague about it, and when you start your day off that way, or even end it, but the rest of your day is just better. Endorphins are gushing. This is so much better.
For sure. And then the last thing I would say is, travel, and to the extent that I get to do it with the family, just experiencing other cultures, seeing other ways of living, seeing other, I just find it, we live in a very big world and sometimes it feels very small, but being able to get out there and experience life differently through different eyes is, I think, one of the best gifts that we've been able to give to our kids. And something I hope that we can do, for the rest of our lives, is just go out there, explore, adventure, and, not know exactly everything that's going to happen. I think not knowing the answer to everything is a good thing.
What's the most memorable family trip you've taken?
We actually took a family trip to Sweden a couple summers ago, and I was just absolutely blown away. I think we all were, about just how awesome and beautiful Stockholm is, and just the archipelagos around it, and just being on the water, and it was a really fun trip.
It's awesome. Iceland was a call out for me. Went to family, walking on volcanoes, and
it's on our list. We've got a list.
Yeah,
we just have to find the time to go do it.
Okay,
not find it. We'll make the time to go do it.
Make the time. That's right. It's awesome. Very cool. Thanks for sharing.
Great life lessons.
And here I'll give you some other unsolicited advice.
Yeah, ribbit.
About this is my keys to longevity. One is continue to accumulate friends who are younger than you. Always, meet new people who are younger that are going to have a divergent perspective from you. That's number one. Number two, never stop listening to new music, because you're like, oh, I only listen to, classic rock. Well, you kind of are missing, being a part of what's happening right now. And there's a lot of really great things happening right now. And so the indoor cycling affords me that opportunity. And then, the last thing is just generally take good care of yourself. Eat well, sleep well, exercise, and if you do all those three things, you're gonna stay, young and relevant for a long time.
I love all those three. And funny enough, I don't think I've ever heard the first two. Obviously, the three is table stakes.
Yeah.
But those first two are fantastic.
Yeah, love those first two.
I wrote those down. Friends that are younger than you. I never thought about that, but like that is actually important.
It's super important.
Do I keep you young, Carlo?
You have an older soul than me, so no. I think I don't think you do.
No, I'm afraid not.
Even though you're 10 years younger, it doesn't feel that way sometimes. So you keep it's the opposite direction, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
those are great.
Especially in marketing, I think it's easy to become defensive, and it's easy to become, well, this is how it's always been done, kind of, I think, a fixed mindset. And I think, having a growth mindset is, I don't know all the answers. Things are constantly changing. I'm going to learn a lot of things from people who are younger than me, who have different experience. And, at Athletic, I'd say the average age is probably 20 years younger than me. I never think about that because I think, oh, we're all the same, I have great hair, but we're all kind of the same. And part of what I feel like being a good marketer is still staying highly engaged in what's happening in culture, staying highly engaged in what's new, and never being afraid to learn things that you don't know. Like, we're going on an AI journey, which we could do another whole podcast on, but knowing that these tools that we're using are always evolving is critically important to being good at what you do.
Love that.
All right. Just got to give a big shout out for Open Fortune today. We've heard some incredible life lessons today, moments of wisdom that can change the way you see the world. It's funny how sometimes the simplest words can have the biggest impact, kind of like cracking open a fortune cookie and finding a message that clicks. That's the idea behind Open Fortune. They're taking those little slips of paper, turning them into a unique way to deliver your brand's message in over 47,000 restaurants right when people are most opening it. Big names like Duolingo, Zelle, ZipRecruiter are already using this creative approach to connect with their audience in a memorable way. So if you want your brand to deliver a message that really sticks, head over to openfortune.com. Just like the best life lessons, the right words at the right time can make a difference. All right, let's hit into our next quick question round. Person you'd most want to sit down to dinner with, dead or alive?
David Ogilvy.
Favorite city in the world?
New York.
Is it okay to sleep with socks on?
No, ever.
That's 4 in a row, dude.
Yeah, I'm getting
I think anyone that sleeps with socks on is a
I
closet.
just hate people who wear socks and sandals.
It's okay. I'm not like
Socks and sandals also not okay. Yeah.
Fashion faux pas.
No, I do
There's
both.
never a time
I do both.
if it's warm enough for socks, it's too cold for sandals. That's just my mantra.
Yeah, he does both. So that's why I sleep with one eye open if I'm in the same room with him, because I think he's crazy.
Well, you'll just wake up and I'm just swatting flies everywhere.
That is a real story. There's a real story for another day.
That happened like this week. Favorite rom-com?
Princess Bride.
Best spot to eat in Westchester?
Durian. Thai food.
Haven't been there. Got to check it out. Favorite Trinity College alum?
Dave Chang.
In 40 years, what will people be nostalgic for?
Post Malone.
Top 3 CMOs right now.
Emily Silver at Dick's. I may not know their names, but I'll just give you like the brands. I think it's Andy at Liquid Death.
That's so fun. I just called him. That's so crazy. That's so funny.
Apple is still top of its game in terms of marketing. So I don't know who the current marketing person is, but
you mind if I tell Andy that? I was literally just texting him.
No, I would. We share his first name, so
that's awesome.
What's the worst advice you've ever been given?
Do something you love.
Interesting. Why?
Because you don't always get to do something you love. Sometimes you have to do things you hate, and I think that's where you build resilience, and that's where you build grit.
In one sentence, how do you sum up the internet?
Exhilarating and confounding.
Who's somebody you think should hop on this podcast?
Ozma St. John.
I gotta look at who that is.
She's on Real Housewives right now, but she was CMO at Netflix, at Beats by Dre,
Oh, wow.
and Uber,
Got to reach
and a
out.
former colleague at Pepsi.
Oh, wow. I'm sure she's got a wild story. And last question, in 10 years from now, you can catch Andrew Katz, blank.
Still curious.
I love it.
I like that.
Andrew, thanks so much for hopping on, man.
Yeah, no, thank you, Carlo. Thank you, David. Super fun chat.